There are places in the world where winter is not merely a season. It is a presence. It settles over the land like a heavy wool blanket. The air sharpens. The forests fall quiet. To mountains, those ancient sentinels, stand frozen in still reverence. Austria is one of those places, and in this hush, something sacred is born. Christmas in Austria doesn't shout, it doesn't flash. It whispers through snow-covered peaks, candlelit chapels, and melodies carried on cold winds. This is not a land of frenzy or over-decorated storefront. Here, December feels like a slow descent into something timeless. Towns like Hallstatt and Innsbruck, Salzburg and Oberndorf transform, not with spectacle, but with intimacy. You feel it in the crunch of boots on fresh snow, in the smell of cinnamon and pine, in the way people pause at dusk to listen to the church bells echo down cobblestone streets. And it all begins with the Advent season. Unlike in many countries where Christmas seems to start the day after Halloween, Austrians mark time differently. The 4 Sundays of Advent are sacred. Homes light 1 candle each week on an evergreen wreath. It is not just decoration, it is a rhythm, a quiet countdown, a weekly reminder that the light is coming. Markets open in town squares, not just for shopping, but for gathering. These are the famed Christkindl, where families stroll beneath wooden stalls, sipping glühwein or hot punch, warming their hands over fire barrels, listening to brass quartets play traditional carols. But even in the cheer of these markets, there is something else. A gentleness, reverence, because Christmas in Austria is not about dazzle. It's about depth. Here, the most powerful Christmas tradition did not come from a palace or a publishing house. It came from a small village in the dead of winter, in a church with a broken organ. A song composed not to impress, but to bring peace. But we'll come to that story soon. First, imagine this. A snowy village nestled in the Alps. Children gathered at a window, watching candles flicker. A baker pulling warm strudel from an oven. An old man carving a wooden angel by lamplight. A family walking through the darkness to attend a midnight mass that ends with silence, not applause. This is how Austria keeps Christmas, not by lighting everything up, but by letting the darkness mean something. By making space for stillness, for memory, for the soft kind of joy that doesn't fade when the decorations come down. Austria is a country with imperial grandeur in its bones, gilded halls, operas, but in December, it remembers something simpler, something more eternal. That a sacred season begins not with noise, but with a hush, with breath caught in snowlight, with waiting, with wonder. And in this hush, something stirs. A melody, a story, a light in the manger, waiting to be found. To understand how Austria celebrates Christmas today, we must trace a long road, one that winds through mountain villages, Baroque churches, imperial courts, and centuries of devotion. Austria's Christmas is not a modern invention. It is a layered tradition, shaped by history, carried by faith, and refined by time. During the height of the Habsburg Empire, Austria stood at the crossroads of Central Europe. With its capital in Vienna, it absorbed cultural influences from Hungary, Bohemia, Bavaria, and beyond. Yet, within this melting pot, Christmas evolved into something uniquely Austrian, elegant, devotional, and deeply musical. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the Catholic Church played a central role in crafting Christmas as both a religious and cultural anchor. The Counter-Reformation brought a renewed emphasis on public ritual and private piety. Churches staged elaborate nativity plays. Monasteries became hubs of sacred music. Nuns composed Advent hymns, and painters filled altarpieces with soft images of the Christ child surrounded by candlelight and golden halos. But these expressions of faith weren't limited to the clergy. The people embraced them, too, especially in rural Alpine regions, where communities kept older, pre-Christian customs alive and wove them into Catholic celebration. Evergreen boughs, candles in windows, solstice fires, these symbols of continuity and rebirth became part of the Christmas story. By the 19th century, with the Romantic movement sweeping Europe, Austria began to reimagine Christmas with a sense of nostalgia and national identity. folk traditions were recorded, songs were preserved, and the home, not the palace or cathedral, became the center of the celebration. It was also in this era that many customs familiar to us today gained popularity. The Christmas tree, originally a German tradition, took root in Austrian homes. The practice of gift-giving, once reserved for St. Nicholas Day, began to shift toward Christmas. Eve accompanied by the appearance of the Christkindl, a symbolic figure representing the Christ child often imagined as a glowing angelic being who brings gifts in secret and silence. This Christkindl, in many Austrian homes, replaced Santa Claus entirely. And this shift, from St. Nicholas to the Christ child, reflects a deeper value, that the heart of Christmas lies not in spectacle, but in mystery. Throughout the 20th century, even amid wars and modernity, Austria held tightly to these traditions. In fact, during times of upheaval, they became more important. Families clung to them as comfort, as resistance, as a way to stay rooted in something older than conflict. Today, you can still walk through a snow-dusted Austrian village and feel the echoes of this history. The Baroque churches still stand. The bells still ring. The songs, some centuries old, still rise into Advent skies. And what's most beautiful is how the old and the new coexist. A modern Viennese family might shop for gifts in the sleek city mall and then light Advent candles at home, bake gingerbread with recipes from their great-grandmother, and walk through the cold to attend a traditional mass sung entirely in Latin. In Salzburg, you can hear Mozart's carols in one church and folk yodels in another. In Tyrol, artisans still hand-carve nativity figures, as their ancestors did 300 years ago. Austria's Christmas is not static. It evolves, but it evolves with reverence. Because era the season is not simply about decorating a tree or exchanging presents. It's about remembering who you are, where you come from, and how the light still returns, even when the world feels cold. So when Austrians light their candles on Christmas Eve, it is not a gesture of habit. It is a link across generations, across empires, across time. A moment that says, we remember, we believe, we still wait. It began in silence, not the stage-managed kind, but the real kind. The hush that falls when snow blankets a small town, when the night is still and even the river seems to slow. In this stillness, on Christmas Eve of 1818, a song was born. A song that would cross mountains, oceans, and centuries. A song that would become the heartbeat of Christmas for millions. Stille Nacht, heilige Nacht, and silent night, holy night. The story begins in Oberndorf Bay, Salzburg, a modest village nestled along the Salzach River. The local church, St. Nicola, was preparing for its Christmas Mass, but its organ had broken, perhaps from mice, perhaps from cold. Whatever the cause, the silence it left behind could have meant a muted celebration, but instead, it became the backdrop for a miracle. That night, a young priest named Joseph Mohr, who had written a simple 6-verse poem 2 years earlier, handed the verses to his friend, the local schoolteacher and organist, Franz. With only hours to spare, Gruber composed a melody, gentle, flowing, meant for guitar, not organ. They performed it together at midnight mass. Gruber played, Mohr sang. The congregation listened. No trumpets, no fanfare, just 2 voices, a guitar, and the kind of quiet that changes people. They had no idea what they had created. In the months that followed, the song was shared by traveling folk singers. It reached Tyrolean choirs, who brought it into the salons and courts of Europe. By the mid-19th century, Stille Nacht was being sung in English, French, and Czech. By 1900, it was known across the globe, and in 2011, it was declared an intangible cultural heritage by UNESCO. But beyond the history, beyond the fame, what makes Silent Night endure is its emotion. It is not a hymn of triumph, but of tenderness. It does not shout glory, but whispers peace. It does not demand belief, it invites it. Its melody is lullaby-like. Its words, simple, universal. A child is born. The world rests. The night holds its breath, and in that moment, everything is enough. Today, in Austria, Stille Nacht is sacred space. It is sung everywhere, in churches, schools, homes, and town squares. But most especially, it is sung on Christmas Eve, often by candlelight, often as the final song before the night truly begins. In Salzburg, choirs gather beneath the stars to sing it in its original German. In Oberndorf, the Silent Night Chapel, built on the site of the original St. Nicola Church, welcomes thousands each year to hear the hymn in the place where it first rang out. Some families sing it alone, by the tree, just before the presents are opened. Others sing it together at the end of dinner. For many, it marks the moment when the noise of the season falls away, and the heart opens. And what's remarkable is how personal the song becomes. For Austrians, it is not just a national treasure, it is a memory of grandparents who sang it decades ago, of candles held in cold hands, of childhood nights spent watching snow fall and feeling, maybe for the first time, that the world was safe. Because Silent Night is more than a carol. It is a return to stillness. To the idea that something sacred can be born not in noise, but in quiet. And in a season that can so easily become overwhelming, Austria reminds us, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is listen. In Austria, Christmas is not just a cultural event, it is a deeply spiritual one. It lives not only in homes and marketplaces, but in the quiet interiors of ancient churches, in the mountain paths that pilgrims walk by torchlight, in the whispered prayers of families gathered around candlelit tables. To celebrate Christmas here is to practice devotion, not just to a religion, but to meaning. Austria remains, to this day, a predominantly Catholic country, and the faith that has shaped its history is most present during the Advent and Christmas seasons. Yet this religiosity is not rigid or imposed, it is woven into the rhythm of life, particularly in small Alpine communities where tradition and belief are one. It begins with Advent, observed with a calm reverence. Homes display wreaths of evergreen, the Advent scrans with 4 candles, one for each Sunday leading up to Christmas. Each candle lit is not just a symbol of time passing, but of light approaching. Churches host Advent concerts, often filled with choral music from local singers, echoing through Baroque cathedrals and wooden chapels alike. These concerts, unlike commercial carol services, are reflective. The music chosen is often minor key, meditative, drawing listeners inward. And then comes Nokabuna, Christmas Eve. While the evening may include family gatherings and festive meals, it always returns to the sacred. The highlight for many Austrians is the Christmas, the midnight mass. In cities, these services are elaborate, organs resounding, choirs singing Stille Nacht, the scent of frankincense rising toward vaulted ceilings. But in rural towns, the scene is more intimate. Parishioners walking through the snow to their local church, candles flickering in every window, bells tolling through the valley. Children participate in Krippenspiel nativity, plays that reenact the story of Bethlehem. In many places, these are performed inside churches, just before the midnight mass. They are not polished productions, but heartfelt offerings, community art, passed from generation to generation. What's unique about Austrian Christmas worship is how embodied it is. Faith is not just spoken, it's walked, sung, built, tasted. In Tyrol, for example, villagers gather a hike by torchlight up snowy slopes to attend early morning mass. In Styria, small shrines to the Virgin Mary are adorned with evergreens and candles. In Vorarlberg, local choirs sing Gregorian chants during the midnight liturgy, drawing on centuries-old monastic tradition. And throughout the country, the Krippe, the nativity scene, is not just a decoration, but a theological reflection. Many families keep their Krippe empty until Christmas Eve, when the Christ child is quietly placed in the manger, often by the youngest child in the family. January 6th, the Feast of the Epiphany, is also steeped in tradition. Known as Heilig Drei, Night the Day honors the arrival of the Magi, and marks the official end of the Christmas season. Across Austria, children dressed as the 3 kings in robes and crowns go door to door singing carols and collecting donations for charity. These star singers, leave a chalk inscription above each door. 20 más C más M más B, mas 24, invoking a blessing for the household in the new year. Even secular Austrians, or those who rarely attend church during the year, often make space for these rituals during Christmas. The Mass, the music, the candlelight, they offer something beyond doctrine. They offer stillness, a pause, a sacred interruption in daily life. Because in Austria, the Christmas spirit is not just festive, it is consecrated. It asks for presence, for reverence, for the willingness to believe, not only in the story of Bethlehem, but in the idea that the divine can appear anywhere, even in a snowy valley, even in the middle of the night. And perhaps this is the secret at the heart of an Austrian Christmas, that the truest gifts do not come wrapped. They arrive in silence, in light, in song, and in faith, still quietly alive in the mountains. In Austria, the Christmas season is not only about angels and lullabies. Beneath the beauty of candlelight and carols lies something older, wilder, drawn from the deep woods and darker corners of Alpine folklore. It is a season of both joy and reckoning, and few figures capture that duality more vividly than Krampus and Nick. Their arrival doesn't wait for Christmas Eve. It comes early on the night of December 5th, known as Krampus. As dusk falls, the quiet towns of Austria change. You hear them before you see them, the clang of cowbells, the clatter of chains, the roar of something not quite human. Tente apia grotesque, fur-covered creatures with twisted horns, long red tongues, and wild eyes. Krampus, the feared and fascinating companion of Saint Nicholas. He is no cartoony villain. Krampus is a relic of pre-Christian mythology, a pagan winter spirit, a punisher of misdeeds, a reminder that the cold season once brought not gifts, but hardship. And yet, in Austria, he is not rejected. He is embraced as part of the season's complex moral landscape. Krampus dosin, de arrivelon. He comes in troops, part of the Krampuslauf, the Krampus Run, where dozens, sometimes hundreds, of masked and costumed figures parade through the streets. They stomp, growl, and sometimes swipe gently at onlookers with bundles of birch sticks. Children squeal. Adults laugh nervously. Fires burn. Drums pound. The night feels ancient, theatrical, alive. And then, just when the menace reaches its peak, a calmer figure steps forward, dressed in bishop's robes. Holding a staff, Nicholas arrives with dignity and kindness. He does not throw candy. He gives it deliberately. Though is not ill, he speaks softly. He listens to children's promises. He reads from a golden book. He represents virtue, patience, generosity. The contrast is deliberate and powerful. Krampus and Nikolaus do not oppose each other. They balance each other. One embodies consequence. The other, compassion. One frightens. The other forgives. Together, they teach a lesson older than the season itself. That goodness is chosen, not automatic. That even the kindest souls face moments of reckoning and renewal. On December 6th, Nikolaustag children awake to find out whether they've been visited. Well-behaved ones receive sweets, fruits, and small gifts left in polished boots. Naughty ones might find a stick or a note from Krampus. But rarely is the judgment harsh. The tradition is more about reflection than punishment. Elsewhere in the country, especially in Terelol and Carinthia, other figures appear, perked in, spirits of winter who wear wooden masks and perform symbolic dances to drive away darkness. Rancht, the rough nights between Christmas and Epiphany, when spirits are believed to wander and rituals for protection are performed. These customs, though ancient, are not relics. Theatre live reimagined every year by modern Austrians, who understand that the holidays are not only about light, but about learning to walk through the shadows. Children who grow up with Krampus do not become more fearful, they become more aware. They learn that actions matter, that kindness is not automatic, that the world holds both cold and warmth, and we must choose which one we offer. And perhaps that's what makes Austrian Christmas feel so honest. It doesn't pretend December is all cheer. It acknowledges the dark in myth, in memory, in winter itself. But then it walks through it, candlelit and song on tongue, heart open, because in Austria, the spirit of Christmas is not sanitized. It is true, and in that truth, it becomes not just a holiday, but a transformation. In the crisp stillness of an Austrian winter, warmth is not just found in the hearth or the hymns, it's found in the kitchen. Behind snow-covered windows and fogged-up glass, something rich simmers, something sweet bakes, and the scent of memory rises with every dish. Austrian Christmas is, at its heart, a culinary celebration, a tapestry of regional flavors, family traditions, and the comforting presence of shared meals. Unlike many cultures where Christmas Day holds the spotlight, in Austria, the main feast happens on Christmas Eve, Heiliger Abend. Yet the celebration is not extravagant. It is intimate, often simple, focused more on togetherness than excess. In many homes, especially those rooted in older traditions, the evening meal is meatless, in accordance with Catholic fasting practices. A common dish is Wiener fish soup, Viennese fish soup, or carp, baked or fried, often served with parsley, potatoes, and lemon. But in other families, especially in Western Austria, heartier fare takes over. You might find Käsespätzle soft egg noodles tossed in melted cheese and topped with crispy onions, a mountain comfort food beloved in Tyrol and Schweinsbraten roast pork with crackling skin, slow-cooked with garlic and caraway. Rheinsuppe beef broth, served with semolina dumplings or thin pancake strips, fritted on, warming the soul before the main course. Rotkraut, red cabbage stewed with apple and vinegar, served as a sweet-sour counterpoint to meats. Whatever the region, the mood remains the same. Tables set with care, candles lit, a hush of reverence before the first bite, and then the desserts arrive. This is where Austrian Christmas truly comes alive. Vanillekipferl crescent-shaped cookies made with ground almonds or hazelnuts, dusted in vanilla sugar, are perhaps the most iconic. Melt in the mouth, delicate, nostalgic, often baked in large batches and stored in tins to last the entire season. Linzer Augen buttery sandwich cookies with jam-filled windows. Lebkuchen, spiced gingerbread rounds, sometimes dipped in chocolate, often decorated by hand. Zimstern, Nostela, and Rumkugeln, stars of cinnamon, nut cookies, and rum truffles that fill plates like edible ornaments. In many households, baking is a multi-generational ritual. Grandparents pass down recipes written in faded ink. Children cut dough into stars and hearts. The kitchen becomes a sacred space, flour-dusted, laughter-filled, echoing with the rhythms of care. And let's not forget Stollen, a dense, fruit-laden bread dusted with powdered sugar, originally from nearby Germany, but widely enjoyed across Austria. Each slice is a celebration of winter's richness, a balance of dried fruit, nuts, and marzipan. To accompany these treats, glowing, warm, spiced red wine, sold in mugs at every Christmas market. Punch, sweet alcoholic punches made with tea, citrus, and rum or schnapps. Eierlikör, a thick egg liquor poured into tiny glasses as a warming toast. These drinks aren't consumed in haste. They're sipped, often outdoors in the cold, with gloved hands and good company. Food in Austria isn't just about taste, it's about ritual. Meals mark the hours, recipes mark the generations, and through it all, there's a quiet understanding that to cook, to bake, to share is to love. Even the act of offering small plates to neighbors or preparing extra portions for unexpected guests carries symbolic weight. Hospitality is not optional, it's essential to the season. And so, in Austrian kitchens across the country, December unfolds not just in dates, but in dough, spice, steam, and song. Because here, to gather around a table at Christmas time is not just to eat. It is to remember, to belong, and to taste the warmth of centuries passed down on wooden spoons and flower-streaked aprons in every single bite. In the Austrian Alps, where winter stretches its arms across villages like a silent guardian, another kind of artistry awakens with the season, one that doesn't come from factories or flashing lights, but from hands, wood, and heritage. Austrian Christmas is not just felt or sung, it is step into an Alpine home during Advent. and you'll likely find something hand-carved resting on a windowsill. A crib, a nativity scene. But not just any nativity. These are often elaborate wooden dioramas, sculpted in detail, telling the story of Bethlehem through the lens of the mountains. In Tyrol, for example, local artisans carve Mary, Joseph, the Christ child, and the shepherds, dressed in traditional Alpine garb. The stable is a wooden hut, resembling a mountain chalet. Sheep roam among moss-covered terrain, carefully arranged on pine-scented displays. Some krippen even include villagers from the artisan's own region, bakers, woodcutters, farmers, as if Bethlehem were just over the next snowy hill. This is devotion through craftsmanship. And it's not limited to nativity scenes. In Christmas markets across Austria, especially in Salzburg, Graz, and the storybook town of Steyr, stalls are filled with handmade treasures, ornaments carved from linden and cherry wood, hand-blown glass baubles that shimmer with snowflake patterns, straw stars meticulously woven in ancient folk designs, wrought iron candle holders forged in blacksmith traditions dating back to the Middle Ages. Each object is more than decoration. It is a vessel of memory, a connection to a time when every item carried the soul of its maker. And nowhere is this more alive than in Austria's Christmas markets. From late November, town squares transform into villages of light. Wooden huts trimmed with fir branches line cobbled streets. The scent of roasting chestnuts, melted cheese, and mulled wine fills the air. Shoppers wander slowly, not to rush or bargain, but to savor. In Vienna's Rathausplatz, illuminated Gothic spires tower over rows of artisan stalls. In Innsbruck, the golden roof gleams over a market framed by snow-draped peaks. In Holstadt, the lakeside square flickers with lanterns as choirs sing beside frozen fountains. And in these markets, you'll still find the makers themselves. Older men with calloused hands, sanding wooden women weaving lace snowflakes, couples pouring beeswax candles one by one. The culture of handwork, traditional craftsmanship, is cherished in Austria. It's taught, preserved, and passed on. Many of these artisans belong to guilds that have existed for centuries. Their techniques are ancient, their pride quiet but firm. This spirit extends into homes. Austrian families take time to decorate together, often using ornaments that have been in the family for generations. Candles, real ones, are carefully placed on trees. Ribbons are tied by hand. Children make gingerbread figures, not for fun alone, but as a contribution to something meaningful. The season is not commercialized, but personalized. And what ties all of this together, the carvings, the cookies, the candles, is snow. Not as inconvenience, but as present. The snow is part of the architecture of the season. It silences noise. It frames windows like lace. It reflects candlelight into night. It makes the entire country feel like it's resting inside a snow globe. Because in Austria, Christmas is not built in a warehouse. It is carved, poured, woven, and shaped by generations of hands that remember the value of slowness. Hands that honor story, that mend what's broken, that offer gifts not wrapped in plastic, but in purpose. And perhaps that's the most beautiful craft of all, the craft of care. Austrian Christmas teaches us that we don't need more, we need meaning. And we find it not in what dazzles, but in what endures. As the final candle flickers in the Advent wreath and snow begins to melt from rooftops, something quiet lingers in Austrian homes. The celebration may be over, the gifts unwrapped, the final chords of Stille Nacht fading into memory, but the spirit remains. Because in Austria, Christmas doesn't end with the clink of a champagne glass or the stroke of midnight. It ends in stillness. In belonging, what defines the Austrian Christmas experience more than anything else is the absence of rush, the deliberate slowness, the permission to pause. In the heart of the Alps, time moves differently, and that difference is where the magic lies. Unlike cultures where the days between Christmas and New Year are a blur of sales, returns, and leftover parties, in Austria, these days are known as the Runcht, the rough nights. 12 nights from December 25th to January 6th, each with its own mystical significance. Rooted in ancient folklore and spiritual tradition, these nights are said to be a time when the veil between worlds is thin. During the Runcht, families light incense and pass it through the home, room by room, warding off bad spirits and inviting peace into the space. Farmers consult signs in nature to predict the coming year. Prayers are whispered, journals are opened, and in some villages, people still leave windows slightly ajar, just in case a wandering soul is passing by. It's not superstition. It's respect for mystery, for memory, for the unknown. And that's what Austrian Christmas ultimately celebrates. Not just joy, but depth. It aski. How do we want to remember this time? Not just what we ate, or what we received, but how we felt. Who we became in the waiting. What kind of silence we allowed to enter. This introspective spirit is what makes Austria's holiday season feel so rooted. It's why families still walk to midnight mass through snow-covered streets. Why children sing the same carols their grandparents once sang. Why even city dwellers pause to smell the fir trees in open-air markets or run their hands over carved wood ornaments before hanging them on a branch. It's about place, about being exactly where you are, about knowing that here in this valley, on this mountain, in this small town or quiet kitchen, you belong. Even those visiting from abroad feel it. They walk the same snowy paths. They stand in silent churches. They drink punch under ancient roofs. And somehow, without words, they're welcomed into a feeling, not by invitation, but by presence. Because Austrian Christmas doesn't try to impress you, it just is. And that's its greatest strength. So when the decorations are packed away, and the carols go quiet, what remains is not a void. It's a stillness that heals. A moment that reminds you are part of something. Not flashy, not loud, but real. A story that began in the dark, was sung into light, and now rests like snow on the rooftops of memory. When all is quiet again, and the last candle has burned low, Austria does not rush to resume the ordinary. Instead, it sits in the afterglow, that tender silence that follows a symphony, the warmth that remains after the fire fades. In Austria, Christmas doesn't end. It gently settles into the soul, and perhaps that is its final gift. Not the feast, not the fanfare, but the invitation to slow down, to notice, to belong, to find peace not in abundance, but in enough. Through ancient hymns and wooden angels, snowy chapels and sacred songs, Austria teaches us that the deepest beauty lies not in display, but in devotion. If this journey through Austria touched something in you, tell us where you're watching from. What time is it right now, where you are? What part of Austria's traditions felt most like home to you? If this story gave you stillness, give something back. Like this video, leave a comment, subscribe to World Traditions Tomorrow. We'll travel again. Another country, another celebration, another soul of the season. But tonight, let silence sing, and let your heart rest in the snow-covered hush of the Alps.